All praises to the Most High God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and peace to everyone joining me on this program. This is the Fountain of Israel's Bible Studies program, and as always, it's an honor for me to stand before you on the Lord's holy Sabbath day. Now, this particular lesson, as you know by the title, is called Purim. Now, right at the outset, let me just say that I'm not saying that you have to observe this holiday. The reason I'm teaching is quite simple. It's in the Bible. So that's why I want to really kind of go over it. Now, we're going to be in the book of Esther pretty much the entire time. And we're going to learn a little bit of the history of it. Now, obviously, we can't read everything, every chapter, every verse, because that'll take a really, really long time. But we'll hit some of the highlights and some of the more important parts and give you guys the gist or a summarization of the book of Esther. So you'll be looking at it more like a truncated view of the book of Esther. Now, again, there, obviously, one of the highlights in the Bible is about Purim, or the Feast of Lots, which is what Purim means. And that's one of the highlights in there. But again, it is not found in Leviticus 23 or, in Torah with the rest of the holy days. So this is not one of the biblical holy days in the sense that this is one that came out of Torah and is God ordained or anything like that. It's a civil holy day or a civil holiday to the Israelites, much like Hanukkah, right? So it's not found in Leviticus 23 as the rest of them, right? As according to the Most High's calendar, right? But this is a memorial that the Israelites were not annihilated at the hands of Haman, right? And it was because of Queen Esther who've done it. So we're going to get a little bit of history in here for you. And we're just going to touch on a couple of things because we have a biblical account. And then when we go into the history of it, you're talking about, actual kings that were, or rulers in history talking about this very same thing. So one of the things that you're going to notice is that, some of these people that have Greek names and Hebrew names, like Ahasuerus or Xerxes, right? So you have to look at that. And the time of Purim, and we're going to read it here in some of the history. I pulled from some of the sources, from the Britannica.com and world history and stuff like that, right? And one of the things we're going to see from there is that this is this is like right after the Babylonian captivity, right? Right before the Greek captivity. So this is right in the middle with the Medo-Persian captivity that we're going to be talking about. Okay. So with that, I'm gonna go ahead and give you some of the sources that I read, some of the information, and then of course we're going to get into the Bible towards the end there. So let's see how much ground we can cover in a particular amount of time. So talking about Purim, and it's the Hebrew word for lots, okay, or in English it's the Feast of Lots, right? And it's kind of an irony how the name came about, but you guys will see this here in a minute. It says a joyous Jewish, I like to say Israelite festival commemorating the survival of the Israelites or Jews in the 5th century BCE. Were marked for death by their Persian rulers. The story is related in the Bible in the book of Esther. Haman, a chief minister of King Ahasuerus, incensed that Mordecai, a Jew or Israelite, held him in disdain and refused obeisance, right? He didn't show him any respect. Haman felt disrespected, right? Convinced the king that the Jews living under Persian rule were rebellious and should be slaughtered. With the king's consent, Haman set a date for the execution, the 13th day of the month of Adar, by casting lots and build a gallows for Mordecai, places where they're gonna, hang them. And that was from the Britannica.com, right? I got that little excerpt from there. Now I got a little bit, a little Wikipedia, and you go to multiple sources, right? So you just do that. And of course, I would encourage you to do even deeper research on it, right? But this is, like I said, this is more of a cursory, a summary. Just you guys get the gist of what Purim is all about. Now, if you choose to observe Purim, okay, fine. If you choose not to, fine. There's no sin in that, okay? But what I do want to put forth is its education. This book in the Bible, okay, needs to also be studied just like the rest, okay? Just like the rest. I'm teaching it because it's in the Bible, okay? So that's why we're going to do that. Okay, so a historical view. Traditional historians. This is really from traditional historians because I wanted to see what people outside of the Bible, how they viewed it, right? Berossus, early 3rd century BCE, provides context for the account in that he records the introduction of idols of Anahita under Artaxerxes II Mnemon throughout the Persian Empire. The 1st century CE historian Josephus, we all know and familiar with Josephus, recounts the origins of Purim in the book 11 of his Antiquities of the Jews. And I actually have that book there. He follows the Hebrew Book of Esther, but shows awareness of some of the additional materials found in the Greek version, or the Septuagint, in that he too identifies Ahasuerus as Artaxerxes and provides the text of the king's letter. He also provides additional information on the dating of events relative to Ezra and Nehemiah. Josephus also records the Persian persecution of Jews and mentions Jews being forced to worship at Persian erected shrines. Okay. Then the Josephus of 10th century CE compilation of Jewish history includes an account of the origins of Purim in its chapter 4. It too follows the original biblical account and includes additional traditions matching those found in the Greek version and Josephus, whom the author claims as a source, with the exception of the details of the letters found in latter works. It also provides some contextual information relating to Jewish and Persian history, such as the identification of Darius the Mede as the uncle and father-in-law of Cyrus. A brief Persian account of events is provided by Islamic historians Muhammad Jarir al-Tabari in his History of the Prophets and Kings, completed in 915 CE, basing his account on form Astoria for Esther. He places events during the rule of Haman, Artaxerxes II, but confuses him with Artaxerxes Talwil Abba, Artaxerxes I, while assuming Ahasuerus to be the name of a co-ruler. So there's some confusion there on who it is in this particular person's writing, not the Bible. Another chief Persian account is recorded by Masuda in the Meadows of Gold, completed in 947 CE. He refers to a Jewish woman who had married the Persian king Haman, Artaxerxes II, and delivered her people, right? Thus corroborating this identification of Ahasuerus. He also mentions the woman's daughter, Kume, who is not known in Jewish traditions, but is well remembered in Persian folklore. Okay, Al-Tabari calls her Kumani and tells how her father, Adashar Baman, married her. Ferdowsi is his Shamnameh, in 100 CE, also tells of King Baman marrying Kume. 19th century Bible commentaries generally identify Ahasuerus with Xerxes I of Persia. Okay, so that's some writings, right? So that kind of goes to show you that when you switch cultures and switch languages, your name can indeed change. That's an argument for another day, right? But it can change depending on who's telling the story, right? So it just happens. You just saw it in examples there. Ahasuerus and Xerxes, Greek name, Persian name, or Hebrew name, right? So it's one of those things. All right. Okay, who wrote the book of Esther? Nobody knows, but let's read. The authorship remains unknown. The writer understood the Persian court from the details given of the daily life and traditions, and writes from a pro-Jewish perspective that leads to the theory that a Jewish eyewitness wrote the book. I concur with that. Mordecai in chapter 9 recorded the events of Purim, so there is some speculation that he wrote the book. Historians believe the book was written between 470 and 424 BC. During the reign of Artaxerxes, son of King Xerxes. Judaism refers to Esther as the Megillah of Esther, right? Meaning scroll of Esther. That's what it means, a Megillah. Okay? It is one of 5 scrolls included in the Jewish biblical canon and part of the Ketuvim, the final section of the Hebrew Bible called the Tanakh, right? So it's the last thing, right? Now, the context and background of Esther. Let me go ahead and get a little bit into that, and then we'll dive into the scriptures or the book of Esther, right? Now, a little bit of context and background. Again, the event occurred during the Persian captivity between 483 and 473 BC. During the first half of the reign of King Xerxes, which is his Greek name, right, is also translated as Ahasuerus, the Hebrew name. The events took place in Susa, the capital city of Persis, which is modern-day Iran. The opening banquet scene in Esther corresponds to the historical time period of Xerxes' military campaign against the Greeks in 479 BC. The Greeks defeated the Persians, because we know when we look at the book of Daniel and we look at the kingdoms that's going to come in succession, right? We know that you have the Babylonian captivity, then you have the Medes and the Persian captivity, and then you have the Greeks, and then you have the Romans. So this comes to no surprise to us, right? So it said the Greeks defeated the Persians. We are aware. The first remnant of people captured have returned to Judah to restore the temple and worship. Mordecai and others remained in Persia. Esther is unique because of the absence of any reference to God or use God's name, right? So we won't see the Tetragrammaton, we won't see Yahweh, we won't see Yahovah, we won't see Yahuwah, we won't see any of that in the particular book, right? However, God's sovereign care for the Jews or the Israelites permeates the book. The book explains the Feast of Purim, still celebrated by Jews to remember the deliverance from Haman's evil plot. That's really what it's about, right? It really focuses on that. That's one of the main ideas, right? So the fact that the Israelites survived this almost planned slaughter, it was almost successful, but because of Queen Esther, the Jews or the Israelites were not annihilated, right? Completely destroyed under Persian rule because of one woman. And think about that. When the king offered, hey, you know what? You can have anything. Okay, I'll grant you anything. And all she wanted was her people not to be annihilated. Look at the kind of heart, the kind of leadership, the kind of selflessness that Queen Esther, one of our ancestors, displayed. Something that I think that we need to try our best to emulate in our hearts. Okay, so with that, we're going to go ahead and jump in. We're going to read as much as we can. Now, again, we're not going to read everything straight through. We're going to read large chunks, large passages, but we can't read everything straight to. Time won't permit, right? But we will be starting in the first book, in the book of Esther, right? So I'm going to start at chapter 1, verse 1, and then we will move around, right? Now, again, I'm going to encourage you to read the entire book of Esther, okay? This is something you guys want to observe in your own household, to each his own. You can do that, starting with a lesson, and then, of course, you can read everything to your family if you want. If you don't, there's no problem. You did not sin. You did not break any law or anything like that, okay? So, but if you just want to be educated on the book of Esther and, everything that is contained in it, then, this is for you, right? So we're going to start at chapter 1, verse 1. And it says, we're going to let the Bible speak. Now it came to pass in the days of Ahasuerus, this is Ahasuerus, which reigned from India even unto Ethiopia, over 127 provinces, that in those days when the king Ahasuerus sat on the throne of his kingdom, which was in Shushan, the palace, in the 3rd year of his reign, he made a feast unto all the princes and his servants, the power of Persia and Media, the nobles and princes of the province being before him. When he showed the riches of his glorious kingdom and the honor of his excellent majesty many days, even 180 days. So he showed them that's 180 days. He's showing all, his leaders, all his subjects, and his officers and all that, and the princes and all. He's showing all them his splendor, right, of his majesty and his kingdom. Took him 180 days to finish. Okay, it's like going to Disney World. You can't go to Disney World and finish it all and do everything in one day, right? Okay, same principle. 5. And when these days were expired, the king made a feast unto all the people that were present in Shushan, the palace, both unto great and small, 7 days in the court of the garden of the king's palace, where were white green and blue hangings fastened with cords of fine linen and purple to silver rings and pillars of marble. The beds were of gold and silver upon a pavement of red and blue and white and black marble. And they gave them drink in vessels of gold, the vessels being diverse one from another, and royal wine in abundance according to the state of the king. And the drinking was according to the law. None did compel. For so the king had appointed to all the officers of his house, that they should do according to every man's pleasure. Also Vashti, the queen, made a feast for the women in the royal house, which belonged to King Ahasuerus. On the 7th day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he commanded Mehuman, Biztha, Arbana, Bittha, and Abagtha, Zethar, and Carcas, and 7 chamberlains that served in the presence of Ahasuerus the king, to bring Vashti the queen before the king with the crown royal, to show the people and the princes her beauty, for she was fair to look upon. Okay, so now his crown jewel, basically his queen, who was very, very beautiful, right? He wanted to show, look what I got, right? It's kind of like the whole trophy wife thing, right? But he's the king. He has the right to do that, okay? There's nothing wrong with that. He wants to show everyone, look at my beautiful queen, right? 12, but the queen Vashti refused to come at the king's command by his chamberlains. Therefore was the king very wroth, and his anger burned in him. Now, I want you guys to understand something. That embarrassed the king. It doesn't matter how you or I feel about the king, want to call her out and put her on display, I should say, put her on display. That was the thing, okay? That's just how that was, right? Okay, so the queen, if the king, who's the authority, who is the sovereign, if he tells someone to come forth, including his wife, and they don't come, that is disrespectful and embarrassing. And it shows he has no strength in his hand. So regardless, very disrespectful to a king, right? So he was angry, burned within him. Then the king said to the wise men, which knew the times, for so was the king's manner toward all that knew law and judgment. The next unto him was Karshina, Shethar, Agmatha, Tarshish, Meres, Marcina, and Memucan, and the 7 princes of Persia and Media, which saw the king's face, and which sat the first in the kingdom. Okay, these are his main people, right? Most important people. These are his main people. Okay. What shall we do unto the queen Vashti according to the law? Because she has not performed the commandment of the king Ahasuerus by the chamberlains. And Memucan answered before the king and the princes, Vashti the queen has not done wrong to the king only, but also to all the princes and to all the people that are in all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus, right? It's very, very disrespectful, okay? We have to understand the time. We have to understand the position, right? Very disrespectful. For this deed of the queen shall come abroad unto all women, so that they shall despise their husbands in their eyes when it shall be reported. The king Ahasuerus commanded Vashti, the queen, to be brought in before him, but she came not. They said, oh, if we let her do this and get away with it, it's going to embolden all the other women in the province to disrespect their husband as well. Regardless of how you feel about it, this is bad. Okay, let's continue. 18. Likewise shall the ladies of Persia and Media say this day unto all the king's princes which have heard of the deed of the queen, thus shall there arise too much contempt and wrath. This is bad news. So we got to get this straightened out quick, right? If it please the king, let there go a royal commandment from him, and let it be written among the laws of the Persians and the Medes, that it be not altered, that Vashti come no more before the king Ahasuerus, and let the king give her royal estate unto another that is better than she. Okay, so strip her from being queen, and let's get a better queen that represents the king, the kingdom, that represent what we're trying to do. Brothers and sisters, same thing. Now we're going to take out little nuggets, right? We're going to take out little nuggets from it, different things. We know this is really about Purim, but that's okay. It's fine for us. It's appropriate for us to learn something on the way to learning something, right? As my old teacher would say. So we're just learning something on the way to learn something. Now, you want to have, fellas, you want to have order in your home, right? And this is what this shows right here. Okay, he requires a certain type of queen. So should you. You need to have a certain type of queen that represents you well, right? That represents you, that signs up for your program. Okay, so she took a real bad time publicly to embarrass her queen. Her king. I'm sorry, to embarrass her king. Not a good time to do that. Very, very embarrassing, and it shows that he, it makes him look weak, right? He can't even summon his own wife to come, his own queen to come forth. She not coming. Not a good look, right? So, fellas, you got to kind of take a lesson there, right? You got to be like, look, make sure that your house is in order, and that's really what he's trying to do, right? And when the king's decree, which he shall make, shall be published throughout all his empire, for it is great. All the wives shall give to their husband honor, both to great and small. Look at what they're trying to do. Honor your. Now, I'm sorry. Shouldn't we do that? Shouldn't wives honor their husband anyway? Okay, let's just keep that in mind. And the same pleased the king and the princes, and the king did according to the word of Memucan. For he sent letters into all the king's provinces, into every province according to the writing thereof, and to every people after their language. So he translated for them too, that every man should bear rule in his own house. What? And that it should be published according to the language of every people. So it don't matter. He said this is what it's going to be. Okay? All the wives are going to respect their husband. I don't have a problem with that. That's just how it, because guess what? That's how it should be today. We should have order, right? You got that in the New Testament. So, regardless that this is coming from a Persian emperor, this person, is not an Israelite. Regardless, this is right. Sorry, this is right. You go in the New Testament, same thing. What is it? It's the Father, it is Christ, the husband, the wife, the children. It's just all according to order, right? Giving reverence to your husband. So this is still in line, right? So he just made it a decree, a royal decree to every wife. Yeah, you respect your husband, right? So he get rid of Vashti and say, you know what? We're going to get us another queen, okay? So I'm going to go to 2, and I may stop somewhere around 18 or something like that, but we'll see. Chapter 2. After these things, when the wrath of King Ahasuerus was appeased, he remembered Vashti and what she had done, and what was decreed against her. Then said the king's servant that ministered unto him, let there be a fair young virgins sought for the king. Okay, let's find you someone else, right? And let the king appoint officers in all the provinces of his kingdom, that they may gather together all the fair young virgins unto Shushan the palace, to the house of the women, unto the custody of Haggai, the king's chamberlain, keeping of the women. And let their things be purification be given them. Let their things for purification be given them, right? So they're going to purify themselves for a while. This is going to be a period of cleaning yourself and purifying yourself and stuff like that. And this is virgins, because virgins were prized back then. 4, and let the maiden which pleaseth the king be queen instead of Vashti. And the thing pleased the king, and he did so. Okay, so it's like, look, we do find somebody else that's going to represent a whole lot better. And I'm going to tell you right now, that's how, brothers and sisters, that's how promotion is. Okay, sometimes I understand, some marriages don't work out. I know, God hates divorce and all that, when it actually says God, hate to put it away and all that. But okay, fine. But the thing is, you never know about promotion. Okay, so the promotion is from above. Okay, so if you're a single sister out there, you never know. Okay, you never know. Your promotion is coming from above, and that Yah-fearing husband could be on the way. See, there's little things we can take from anything in the Bible, just learning something on our way to learning something. Brothers, you have a one-away bride. She's rebellious. She don't want to have nothing to do with you. She ain't listening. She's gone and all this other stuff. Don't worry. Your Esther is on the way. You need to find her, but she is out there. Okay? I'm not promoting breaking up and divorce or anything like that, but we all know as adults, it happens. You guys are out there doing it anyway. But if you're righteous and you're female, you could be Esther. And if you're righteous and you're male, you can be like King Xerxes or Ahasuerus, and you can find the queen that's right for you, that represents you. Let's continue. Verse 5. Now in Shushan, the palace, there was a certain Jew whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, and the son of Kish, a Benjamite. Okay, so we know that Mordecai is from the tribe of Benjamin, and probably Queen Esther too, right? Because this was her uncle, right? Who had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captivity, which had been carried away with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had carried away. And he brought up Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter. Okay, for she had neither father nor mother, and the maid was fair and beautiful, whom Mordecai, when her father and mother were dead, took for his own daughter. So he treated her like, own daughter, right? Now you're talking about captivity and stuff. Her mother and father was probably killed. Okay, but she's a young virgin and she still needed some guidance, right? And Mordecai was that guidance. Okay, so it came to pass when the king's commandment and his decree was heard, and when many maidens were gathered together unto Shushan the palace, to the custody of Haggai, that Esther was brought also unto the king's house, to the custody of Haggai, keeper of the women. And the maiden pleased him, and she obtained kindness of him, and he speedily gave her her things for purification, with such things as belonged to her, and 7 maidens, which were meet to be given her. Right? These 7 women really worked for her, right? At that time. Okay. And he preferred her and her maids unto the best place, preferred her and her maids unto the best place of the house of the women. Esther had not showed her people nor her kindred, for Mordecai had charged her that she should not show it. Meaning she didn't say, oh, we're Israelites, right? She didn't publicize that. She didn't really say anything because her uncle said, don't say nothing. Don't say where you from, right? And Mordecai walked every day before the court of the women's house to know how Esther did and what should become of her. Now, when every maid's turn was come to go in to King Ahasuerus, after that she had been 12 months, according to the manner of the women. So it's been like 12 months, everyone get a chance to meet up with the king. For so were the days of their purification accomplished, to wit, 6 months with oil of myrrh, and 6 months with sweet odors, and with other things for the purification of women. So they really did do a purification, just letting you guys know. 13. Then thus came every maiden unto the king, and whatsoever she desired was given her to go with her out of the house of the women unto the king's house. And in the evening she went, and on the morrow she returned into the second house of the women to the custody of Shagaz, the king's chamberlain, which kept the concubines. And she came in unto the king no more, except the king delighted in her, and that she were called by name. Okay, so getting interesting here. Now, when the turn of Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her for his daughter, was come to go in unto the king, she required nothing but that what Haggai, the king's chamberlain, the keeper of the women, appointed. And Esther obtained favor in the sight of all them that looked upon her. So Esther was taken unto the king Ahasuerus into his house royal in the 10th month, which is the month Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. And the king loved Esther above all the women, and she obtained grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown upon her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. In 18, then the king made a great feast unto all his princes and his servants, even Esther's feast. And he made a release to the provinces and gave gifts according to the state of the king. All right, so we're starting to get an idea of, what's going on, what's happening. And this is where Esther is becoming established. She just made clean, right? So she purification and all that other stuff. This wasn't a real quick process. This took months and months, right, for it to come to fruition. And she gained the favor. Again, not saying, hey, I'm Israelite or none of that. She just kept her head down and just did what she was told and followed the guidance of her uncle, Mordecai. Okay, so that's what we have there. So we're going to continue a little bit more, and then I'll jump around a little bit. We'll continue a little bit more and see what's going on here. Okay, so I'm starting back at 2:19. It says, and when the virgins were gathered together the second time, then Mordecai sat in the king's gate. Esther had not yet showed her kindred nor her people, as Mordecai had charged her. For Esther did the commandment of Mordecai, like as when she was brought up with him. Right? He raised her. Okay, I mean he raised her. Okay, so she did what her uncle was. 21. In those days, while Mordecai sat in the king's gate, two of the king's chamberlain, Bigthan and Teresh, of those who kept the door, were wroth and sought to lay hands on the king, on King Ahasuerus. And the thing was known to Mordecai, who told it unto Esther the queen, and Esther certified the king thereof in Mordecai's name. And when inquisition was made of the matter, it was found out. Therefore, they were both hanged on a tree. And it was written in the book of the Chronicles before the king, right? So basically, Mordecai found out that there was a plot against the life of the king. Mordecai told Esther. Esther told her king and gave Mordecai the credit. And then the king found out it was true, took care of those two dudes, right? Chapter 3. And after these things did King Ahasuerus promote Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Haggagite, and advanced him and set his seat above all the princes that were with him. And all the king's servants that were in the king's gate bowed and reverenced Haman, for the king had so commanded concerning him. But Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence. So he did not respect Haman. Then the king's servants, which were in the king's gate, said unto Mordecai, why transgressest thou the king's commandment? Now it came to pass, when they spake daily unto him, and he hearkened not unto them, that they told Haman, to see whether Mordecai's matters would stand, for he had told them he was a Jew. And when Haman saw that Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence, then was Haman full of wrath. Now you guys see what's going on here. And he thought scorn to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had showed him the people of Mordecai. Wherefore Haman sought to destroy all the Jews that were throughout the whole kingdom. Right. So now they knew who he was, and that was not good. The kingdom of Ahasuerus, even the people of Mordecai, which were the Israelites. In the first month, that is the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast Pur, that is the lot. So this is where you get the name Purim, right? It's from lot. They cast lots. Okay. They cast lots before Haman from day to day and from month to month to the 12th month, that is the month of Adar. And Haman said unto King Ahasuerus, there's a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of thy kingdom, and their laws are diverse from all people. Neither keep they the king's laws, and therefore it is not for the king's profit to suffer them. If it please the king, let it be written that they may be destroyed. And I will pay 10,000 talents of silver to the hands of those that have the charge of the business, to bring it into the king's treasury. And the king took his ring from his hand and gave it to Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Haggagite, the Jews' enemy. And the king said unto Haman, the silver is given to thee, the people also, to do with them as it seemeth good to thee. And then were the king's scribes called in the 13th day of the first month, and there was written according to all that Haman had commanded unto the king's lieutenant, and to the governors that were over every province, and to the rulers of the people, of every province, according to the writings thereof, and to every people after their language. In the name of King Ahasuerus was it written and sealed with the king's ring. And the letters were sent by post into all the king's provinces to destroy, to kill, and to cause to perish all Jews, both young and old, little children and women, in one day, even upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and to take the spoil of them for a prey. The copy of the writings for a commandment to be given in every province was published unto all people, that they should be ready against that day. The post went out, being hastened by the king's commandment, and the decree was given in Shushan the palace. And the king and Haman sat down to drink. But the city Shushan was perplexed. Okay, now we know. Now the order has been given out to destroy, okay, just to destroy the Israelites there, okay, commonly referred to as Jews, okay. Now, they, obviously said a lot of the people at this time had dark skin or dark complexions. A lot of them look alike, right? You're talking about someone who had dark skin, and just don't say that you're Israelite and they didn't know where she was from, didn't know what your people were from, right? So, because again, there were some Hamites there, obviously Shemites there, in captivity, because the King Ahasuerus or King Ahasuerus, his province, as you saw in the beginning, is spread far and wide, right? And then he started, Haman, his evil plot. He started just kind of plotting against, okay, well, one of the ways we know is that, their laws are a little bit different, because even in captivity, the Israelites still were trying to, okay, not on a wholesale basis, but trying to kind of keep their laws. Now, we know they didn't do it very well, because they wouldn't have been in captivity in the first place. But that was one of the things, one of the identifying marks. Look back at Daniel, and he still wanted to pray and do his thing and call on another God when he was in Babylon, right? So this is one of the ways they identify. That's how they identify. When observing the Sabbath, you look into history, you look in the Apocrypha, you look in some historical sources, and they were captured because other nations, because of Gentiles and other nations, they kind of saw, they noticed the differences. They notice, they don't eat pork, or they observe the Sabbath day, or they worship to a god, a particular god, things like that. They try to stay away from idols. They reject other idols, the ones who were righteous, right? On a wholesale basis, we know they messed up. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been in captivity. But you get an idea, right? You guys are starting to get the gist of it. So let's read a little bit more, and I am going to jump around a little bit, but let's start at 4, read a little bit, jump around, and you guys will get the gist of it, right? So, chapter 4, verse 1. When Mordecai perceived all that was done, Mordecai rent his clothes and put on sackcloth with ashes, and went out in the midst of the city and cried with a loud and bitter voice, and came even before the king's gate. For none might enter into the king's gate clothed with sackcloth. And in every province, whatsoever the king's commandment and his decree came, there was great mourning among the Jews, and fasting, and weeping, and wailing, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes. Everyone was doing this. Because basically, it was a death note. It was a death sentence. All Jews were on notice. Y'all gonna be killed. And everybody else who wasn't a Jew can just kill a Jew and take what you want from them. That's basically what the decree was, right? And yeah, Wynn got back and it's like, whoa, hold on. Okay. Verse 4. So Esther's maids and her chamberlains came and told it to her. Then was the queen exceedingly grieved, and she sent raiment to clothe Mordecai and to take away his sackcloth from him. But he received it not. He's like, no, don't give me that, because, me and all my people are about to die, right? 5. Then called Esther to Hathach, one of the king's chamberlains, whom he had appointed to attend upon her, and gave him a commandment to Mordecai to know what it was and why it was. So Hathach went forth to Mordecai unto the street of the city, which was before the king's gate. And Mordecai told him all that had happened unto him, and of the sum of the money that Haman had promised to pay the king's treasuries for the Jews to destroy them. Also, he gave him the copy of the writing of the decree that was given at Shushan to destroy them, to show it unto Esther and to declare it unto her, and to charge her that she should go in unto the king to make supplication unto him, okay, basically plead for our lives, and to make request before him for her people. And Hathach came and told Esther the words of Mordecai. Again, Esther spake unto Hathach and gave him commandment unto Mordecai. So they were just passing back and forth, right? Passing information back and forth. All the king's servant, verse 11, and the people of the king's province do know that whosoever, whether man or woman, shall come unto the king into the inner court, who is not called, there is one law of his to put him to death, except such to whom the king shall hold out the golden scepter, that he may live. But I have not been called to come in unto the king these 30 days. And they told Mordecai Esther's words. Then Mordecai commanded to answer Esther, think not with thyself that thou shalt escape in the king's house more than all the Jews. For if thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time, then shall their enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place. But thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed. And who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Then Esther bade them return Mordecai this answer. Okay, so here's the answer that she's saying. Go gather together all the Jews that are present in Shushan, and fast ye for me, and neither eat nor drink 3 days, nights, or day. I also and my maidens will fast likewise. And so will I go in unto the king, which is not according to the law. And if I perish, I perish. Okay, so she said, okay, now it is a law. The king got this law. And this is the queen. No one can go into the inner court unless the king calls them to the inner court. And the law is, if someone goes in there without the king calling them to the inner court, they die, right? Unless he raise up his golden scepter and say, okay, cool, it's fine for them to be here, whatever, they're going to die, right? That is a law. So they can't do it. But Mordecai said, look, if you don't do this, we're all dead. Okay, we're not going to make it, of course. And then so obviously Esther said, okay, fine, I'm going to do this first. I'm going to fast. I'm going to pray. I'm going to do all this, right? And then I'm going to go ahead and chance it. If I die, I die. It is what it is, okay? But I'm going to try to save my people, right? So that's what he's going to do. So we're going to go ahead and move forward, okay? And I'm going to go to chapter 5. I'm going to jump up a little bit. We got to get ahead a little bit. So I'm going to go 5 and 1. Now it came to pass on the 3rd day that Esther put on her royal apparel and stood in the inner court of the king's house, over against the king's house. And the king sat upon his royal throne in the royal house over against the gate of the house. And it was so, when the king saw Esther the queen standing in the court, that she obtained favor in his sight. And the king held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. So Esther drew near and touched the top of the scepter. Then said the king unto her, what wilt thou, Queen Esther? Like, how can I help you, right? And what is thy request? It shall even be given thee to the half of the kingdom. Whatever you want, I'll even give you half the kingdom. Ask for whatever you want. Okay? Esther answered, if it seem good unto the king, let the king and Haman come this day unto the banquet that I have prepared for him. Then the king said, cause Haman to make haste, that he may do as Esther has said. So the king and Haman came to the banquet that Esther had prepared. And the king said unto Esther at the banquet of wine, what is thy petition? And it shall be granted thee. And what is thy request? Even to the half of the kingdom it shall be performed. Then answered Esther and said, my petition and my request is, if I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition, and to perform my request, let the king and Haman come to the banquet that I shall prepare for them, and I will do tomorrow as the king has said. Then went Haman forth that day, joyful and with a glad heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, that he stood not up, nor moved for him, he was full of indignation against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman refrained himself, and when he came home, he sat and called for his friends and Zeresh, his wife. And Haman told them of the glory of his riches and the multitude of his children and all the things therein the king had promoted him, and how he had advanced him above the princes and servants of the king. So Haman was really up there. He was coming like second in charge, right? Haman said, moreover, yea, Esther the queen did let no man come in with the king unto the banquet that she had prepared, but myself. And tomorrow am I invited unto her also with the king. Yet all this availeth me nothing, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. He said, you know what? This is cool. I'm being promoted. I'm being honored. You know, I'm the king's right hand. You know, Esther, she vibing with me and everything. But Mordecai, he disrespect me. He don't put any respect on my name. I come in his presence. He don't bow, stand up, no genuflect. And he don't want to, he don't like that. Okay? He don't like that. He want all his respect that's due him, right? And then, and 14, then said Zeresh his wife and all his friends unto him, let a gallows be made of 50 cubits high, and tomorrow speak thou unto the king that Mordecai may be hanged thereon. Then go out in merrily with the king unto the banquet. And the thing pleased Haman, and he caused the gallows to be made. Okay, so just somewhere where he's going to go ahead and hang Mordecai, right? So they wanted to tell him that, you know, just so he feel better, you know. So we're going to go ahead and read a little bit more. We're almost through. We're in chapter 6. And it says, and on that night, not the king sleep. And he commanded to bring the book of records of the Chronicles, and they were read before the king. And it was found written that Mordecai had told of Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's chamberlains, the keepers of the door, who sought to lay hand on the king Ahasuerus. And the king said, what honor and dignity has been done to Mordecai for this? Then said the king's servant that ministered unto him, there is nothing done for him. And the king said, who is in the court? Now Haman was come into the outward court of the king's house to speak unto the king to hang Mordecai on the gallows that he had prepared for him. And the king's servants said unto him, behold, Haman standeth in the court. And the king said, let him come in. So Haman came in, and the king said unto him, what shall be done unto the man whom the king delighted to honor? Now Haman thought in his heart, to whom would the king delight to do honor more than myself? And Haman answered the king, for the man whom the king delighted to honor, let the royal apparel be brought which the king used to wear, and the horse that the king rideth upon, and the crown royal which is set upon his head. And let his apparel and horse be delivered to the hand of one of the king's most noble princes, that they may array the man withal whom the king delighted to honor, and bring him on horseback through the street of the city, and proclaim before him, thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delighted to honor. Then the king said to Haman, make haste and take the apparel and the horse, as thou hast said, and do even so to Mordecai the Jew that sitteth at the king's gate. Let nothing fail of all that thou hast spoken. Then took Haman the apparel and the horse, and arrayed Mordecai, and brought him on horseback through the street of the city, and proclaimed therefore before him, thus shall it be done unto the man whom the king delighted to honor. And Mordecai came again to the king's gate. But Haman hastened to his house, mourning and having his head covered. And Haman told Zeresh his wife and all his friends everything that had befallen him. Then said his wise men and Zeresh his wife unto him, if Mordecai be of the seed of the Jews, before whom thou hast begun to fall, thou shalt not prevail against him, but shalt surely fall before him. And while they were yet talking with him, came the king's chamberlains and hastened to bring Haman unto the banquet that Esther had prepared. Okay, so we have them. They're getting ready to go to the whole banquet and stuff. He felt pretty bad, but now he's going to go ahead and go to the banquet, and we're going to see what happens. Okay, we got a little bit more, guys, because there's only 10 chapters of Esther, right? And we're jumping around. Okay, so let's look at this in verse 7. So the king and Haman came to the banquet at Esther, the queen. And the king said again unto Esther on the second day at the banquet of wine, what is thy petition, Queen Esther? And it shall be granted thee. And what is thy request? And it shall be performed even to the half of the kingdom. Then Esther, the queen, answered and said, If I have found favor in thy sight, O king, and if it please the king, let my life be given me at my petition, and my people at my request. For we are sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be slain, and to perish. But if we had been sold for bondmen and bondwomen, I had held my tongue, although the enemy could not countervail the king's damage. Then King Ahasuerus answered and said unto Esther the queen, Who is he, and where is he that durst presume in his heart to do so? And Esther said, The adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman. Then Haman was afraid before the king and queen. And the king arising from the banquet of wine in his wrath went into the palace garden, and Haman stood up to make request for his life to Esther the queen. For he saw that there was evil determined against him by the king. Then the king returned out of the palace garden into the palace of the banquet of wine, and Haman was fallen upon the bed whereon Esther was. Then said the king, Will he force the queen also before me in the house? And the word went out of the king's mouth. They covered Haman's face. And Aborna, one of the chamberlains, said unto the king, Behold also the gallows 50 cubits high, which Haman had made for Mordecai, who had spoken good for the king, standeth in the house of Haman. Then the king said, Hang him thereon. So they hang Haman on the gallows that had been prepared for Mordecai. Then was the king's wrath pacified. So what the enemy set up for your destruction, clearly the Most High was at work. Now, it's unique that the book of Esther doesn't mention the Most High, but we see his hand. So we're going to go ahead and look at a little bit more. Again, we're 8, and I did jump around a little bit. I'm reading most of it, but again, you want a clear understanding of it, please just read all the way through. As you can see, it's kind of a quick read, right? But read this for yourself, for your family, just as a nice little history lesson. This is part of our history, right? Chapter 8. Okay, I'm going to start at verse 1, may jump around a little bit. And on that day did the king Ahasuerus give the house of Haman the Jews enemy unto Esther the queen. And Mordecai came before the king, for Esther had told what he was unto her. And the king took off his ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it unto Mordecai. And Esther set Mordecai over the house of Haman. And Esther spake yet again before the king, and fell down at his feet. Look at the respect. Fell down at his feet, and besought him with tears to put away the mischief of Haman the Agagite, and his device that he had devised against the Jews. Then the king held out the golden scepter towards Esther. So Esther arose and stood before the king, and said, If it please the king, and if I found favor in his sight, and this thing seems right before the king, and I be pleasing in his eyes, let it be written to reverse the letters devised by Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, which he wrote to destroy the Jews which are in all the king's provinces. For how can I endure to see the evil that shall come unto my people? And how can I endure to see the destruction of my kindred? Then the king Ahasuerus said unto Esther the queen, and to Mordecai the Jew, Behold, I have given Esther the house of Haman, and him they have hanged upon the gallows, because he laid his hands upon the Jews. Write ye also for the Jews, as it is like you, in the king's name, and seal it with the king's ring. For the writing which is written in the king's name and sealed with the king's ring may no man reverse, right? So he's going to go ahead and give this law, okay? So we saw Esther and Mordecai in action in chapter 4 and 5, chapter 6 and 7. We get to see Mordecai, how Mordecai is honored and Haman is executed. And now we're looking at the Jewish people are rescued and delivered in 8 and 9, right? So that's where we are now. And then we're going to see the Feast of Lots also in 9. But let's go ahead and look at 8 real quick. And verse 9. Then were the king's scribes called at that time in the 3rd month, that is, the month Sivan, on the 23rd day thereof, and it was written according to all that Mordecai commanded unto the Jews, and to the lieutenants, and to the deputies, and the rulers of the provinces which are from India unto Ethiopia, and 170 provinces, unto every province according to the writing thereof, and unto every people after their language, and to the Jews according to their writing and according to their language. And he wrote in the King Ahasuerus' names, and sealed it with the king's ring, and sent letters by post on horseback, and riders on mules, camels, and young dromedaries, wherein the king granted the Jews which were in every city to gather themselves together, and to stand for their life, to destroy, to slay, and to cause to perish all the power of the people and provinces that would assault them, both little ones and women, and to take the spoil of them for a prey. So the exact opposite. Someone come to mess with you, you have a right to bear arms, destroy them, and take their loot, right? 12, and upon one day in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, namely upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, the copy of the writing for a commandment to be given in every province, published unto all people, and the Jews should be ready against that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. Now, 14. So the post that rode upon mules and camels went out, being hastened and pressed in by the king's commandment. And the decree was given to Shushan the palace. And Mordecai went out from the presence of the king in royal apparel of blue and white, and with a great crown of gold, and with a garment of fine linen and purple. And the city of Shushan rejoiced and was glad. The Jews had light and gladness and joy and honor. And in every province and in every city wheresoever the king's commandment and his decree came, the Jews had joy and gladness, a feast and a good day. And many of the people of the land became Jews, for the fear of the Jews fell upon them. Interesting how we have certain people, certain of us, Israelites, they have this, and this is just a quick aside, but they'll say quickly that, hey, you know what? Gentile can't be converted. And many people here became Jews. Oh, they wasn't a real Jew, a bloodline Jew. That's not okay. Then an actual Jew didn't come a bloodline Gentile either. How convenient, right? How convenient. Oh, that's just, that's just Israelites lost Israel and they just became Hellenized. They became Jew. I mean, they became, Gentiles. Did they become Gentiles by blood? Oh, they became Gentiles by custom. Well, the same is true here. And for those who may disagree, let's read 17 one more time, shall we? And in every province and in every city, whithersoever the king's commandment and his decree came, the Jews had joy and gladness, a feast and a good day. And many of the people of the land became Jews, for the fear of the Jews fell upon them. Now, I'm going to go ahead and just keep going, right? I'm just going to keep going because I already know that some people, they have certain things fixed in their mind. But those who are thinking people, we see what's going on here, right? That's learning something on the way to learning something. Let's go ahead and get into this whole Purim, Feast of Lots thing, right? So let's go ahead. We're going to skip up a little bit, and I'm going to go, because the verse I want is really, 30 and 32, basically. Yeah, I think I want 30 and 30, basically 30 and 32, but I'm going to read up to it. So right now I'm going to go all the way to verse, let's see where we want to go. Let me start at 25 and then we'll start closing it out. Start at 25. But when Esther came before the king, he commanded by letters that his wicked device, which he devised against the Jews, should return upon his own head, and that he and his sons should be hanged on the gallows. And therefore they called these days Purim, after the name of Pur. Therefore, for all the words of this letter and of that which they had seen concerning this matter, and which had come unto them, the Jews ordained and took upon them, and upon their seed, and upon all such as joined themselves unto them, So, as it should not fail, that they would keep these 2 days according to their writing and according to their appointed time every year. And that these days should be remembered and kept throughout every generation, every family, every province, every city, and that these days of Purim should not fail from among the Jews, nor the memorial of them perish from their seed. So it's supposed to go pass on through the line. 29. And then Esther the queen, the daughter of Abihail, and Mordecai the Jew, wrote with all authority to confirm this second letter of Purim. And he sent the letters unto all the Jews to the 120 and 70 provinces of the kingdom of Ahasuerus with words of peace and truth, to confirm these days of Purim in their times appointed, according as Mordecai the Jew and Esther the queen had enjoined them, and as they had decreed for themselves and for their seed, the matters of the fasting, their cry. And the decree of Esther confirmed these matters of Purim, and it was written in the book. Okay, guys, so you can go ahead and read that. Read chapter 10, which is only a couple of verses as well. But I just want to, again, give you a little bit of a history lesson. Go ahead and give you an idea of what it really is, what it's really about, giving it to you straight from the scriptures. Okay, this is Purim, okay, the Feast of Lots. I'll give you a little bit of history, okay, and it just has a little summary, just as a little recap of the verse, of the chapters, right? Let me just give that to you, and we'll go ahead and close it out. See, we look at chapter 1 and 2, we see Vashti, and then we also see the transition where Esther becomes queen, chapters 1 and 2. We look at chapters, half of chapter 2 up into about half of chapter 3, roughly, that Haman plots to kill the Jews because he felt disrespected because of Mordecai, Esther's uncle, right? And then we look at, chapter 4 and then half of chapter 5. We see that Esther and Mordecai, they take action. Okay, we got to do something or else we're going to be annihilated, right? So we see that take place. And then we go to chapter 6. Haman's plan or his plot fails, right? So we look at 6 and part of chapter 7, and as Mordecai is honored and Haman is executed. So we see that play out in there. And then of chapter 8 and part of chapter 9, we see the Jewish people are rescued and delivered. And that is because the selflessness and the wisdom of her uncle and Esther, okay, both, who've turned the whole thing around, okay? So Haman's evil device and plot turned against himself, okay, on his own head, okay? And then finally we look at chapter 9, I should say. Chapter 9, that's when you see the Feast of Lot, okay? Chapter 9 at the very end of that chapter, okay? And Mordecai and King Xerxes are revered, okay? In 30 and 32 of chapter 9, okay? So we look at this and we see Feast of Purim. Again, this is for educational purposes, right? Israel, we're like a class. We're here to learn. And if it's in the Bible, we're eventually going to get around to it. We're going to learn about it. We're going to read it. Okay. That's just what this is for. So if you just wanted a little bit of history, a little bit of education on the Feast of Lots, which is called Purim. And the irony is because they cast lots to figure out what day they were going to kill the Jews. But then they went ahead and adopted, Mordecai and Esther, they went ahead and adopted that name and wanted to make it a memorial, right? And this was during the Persian captivity. So with that, I hope someone's got something out of it. So until next time, search the scriptures and prove all things. Shalom, Israel.